Growing like the breeze, country roads sing.
And I consider myself primarily a performer, an entertainer, you know.
What Elvis Presley was to the 50s and the Beatles were to the 60s, John Denver was to the 70s.
He sang from the heart. Everything that he sang about was a reflection of himself.
He had a special voice and a special gift.
What if everything you thought you knew about one of America's most beloved singers was just the tip of the iceberg? After nearly 3 decades of silence, Annie Martell Denver, the woman who inspired some of John Denver's most beautiful love songs, has finally decided to speak her truth. At 78 years old, she's ready to share secrets that have been locked away for far too long. The real story behind their marriage, their heartbreaking divorce, and what really happened in those final years before John's tragic death in 1997. Get ready, because what Annie reveals will change how you see the man behind Rocky Mountain High forever. For years, fans around the world have wondered about the mysterious woman who captured John Denver's heart and inspired him to write Annie's song in just 10 minutes while sitting on a ski lift in Aspen. They've speculated about their fairy tale romance, their sudden divorce, and whether there was more to their story than what the media reported. Now, after decades of staying quiet and living her life away from the spotlight, Annie Denver is finally ready to set the record straight. Annie Martell was just a young woman from Minnesota when she first met John Denver in the late 1960s. She wasn't looking for fame or fortune. She was simply a college student trying to figure out her place in the world. John, whose real name was Henry John Deutschendorf Jr., was still struggling to make it as a musician. He had big dreams and an even bigger heart, but success seemed just out of reach. When their paths crossed, neither of them could have imagined the incredible journey that lay ahead. Their love story began like something out of a movie. John was immediately smitten with Annie's natural beauty and down-to-earth personality. She wasn't impressed by his musical ambitions or his charm. Instead, she saw something deeper in him, something real and genuine that drew her in. Annie recalls how John would write her letters filled with poetry and dreams of the future they could build together. He would sing to her softly, testing out new melodies and lyrics that would later become some of his most famous songs. But according to Annie, their relationship wasn't the perfect romance that fans imagined. Even in those early days, John struggled with demons that would follow him throughout his life. He had a restless spirit that could never quite settle down, always searching for something more, something just beyond his reach. Annie loved him deeply, but she also saw the pain he carried inside, the pressure he put on himself to succeed, and the way he sometimes turned to alcohol to quiet his racing thoughts. When John finally achieved the success he had always dreamed of, everything changed. Rocky Mountain High, Take Me Home, Country Roads, and Annie's song turned him into a household name almost overnight. Suddenly, the quiet life that Annie had fallen in love was replaced by sold-out concerts, constant touring, and the endless demands of fame. John was living his dream, but Annie found herself feeling more and more like a stranger in her own life. The pressure of being married to one of the world's most famous singers was overwhelming. Everywhere they went, fans wanted a piece of John and, by extension, a piece of their private life. Annie tried to support her husband's career, but she watched as the man she had fallen in love with slowly disappeared under the weight of celebrity. The gentle, thoughtful person who used to write her love letters was replaced by someone who was always rushing to the next concert, the next recording session, the next opportunity. Annie reveals that John's fame also brought out sides of his personality that she had never seen before. The pressure to maintain his image as America's wholesome country boy created a constant internal struggle. He felt like he had to be perfect all the time, and when he couldn't live up to that impossible standard, he would become frustrated and sometimes angry. The alcohol that had once been an occasional escape became a more regular companion, and Annie watched helplessly as it began to change the man she loved. Their marriage faced another major challenge when they decided to start a family. After struggling with fertility issues, John and Annie made the difficult decision to adopt. They welcomed 2 beautiful children into their home, Zachary and Anna Kate, and for a while, it seemed like having a family might bring them the stability and happiness they had been searching for. John adored his children and tried to be a good father, but his career demands meant he was often away from home for weeks or even months at a time. Annie found herself essentially raising their children as a single mother while trying to maintain the facade of a happy celebrity marriage. She attended John's concerts when she could, smiled for cameras, and played the role of a supportive wife. But inside, she was struggling. The loneliness was overwhelming, and she began to feel like she was losing herself in John's shadow. She had her own dreams and ambitions, but they seemed to matter less and less as John's career continued to soar. The breaking point came when Annie realized that she and John had become strangers living in the same house. They would go days without having a real conversation, and when they did talk, it often turned into arguments about his drinking, his absence, or their growing distance from each other. Annie tried to get John to slow down, to spend more time with the family, to address his drinking problem, but he couldn't or wouldn't listen. His music and his career had become his whole identity, and he didn't know how to exist without them. According to Annie, the decision to divorce wasn't made lightly or quickly. They went to counseling, they tried separating for a while, and they both desperately wanted to make their marriage work, especially for the sake of their children. But John's demons were stronger than his desire to change, and Annie realized that staying in the marriage was hurting not just her, but their children as well. The constant tension, the arguments, and the uncertainty were creating an unhealthy environment for everyone involved. The divorce proceedings were difficult and painful for both of them. Despite their problems, John and Annie still loved each other, and ending their marriage felt like admitting failure. John was devastated by the divorce and struggled even more with depression and alcohol abuse in the years that followed. Annie, meanwhile, tried to rebuild her life and focus on raising their children, but she couldn't escape the public scrutiny that came with being John Denver's ex-wife. Annie reveals that even after their divorce was finalized in 1982, she and John maintained a complicated relationship. They co-parented their children as best they could, and there were moments when it seemed like they might find their way back to each other. John would call her late at night, sometimes drunk, sometimes sober, talking about their past and wondering if they had made a mistake. These conversations were both heartbreaking and confusing for Annie, who was trying to move forward with her life while still caring deeply about the man who had been her husband for 15 years. In the years following their divorce, Annie watched from a distance as John continued to struggle with his personal demons. His career had its ups and downs. He had other relationships that didn't work out, and his drinking problem continued to worsen. Annie wanted to help him, but she also knew that she couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. She had learned through years of trying that she couldn't love John enough to fix his problems, and that protecting her own mental health and her children's well-being had to come first. The most painful revelation that Annie shares is about John's final years. She reveals that despite their divorce and time that had passed, John never really got over their marriage ending. He would often tell friends and family that Annie was the love of his life, and that losing her was his biggest regret. This knowledge was both touching and heartbreaking for Annie, who had moved on and built a new life for herself but still cared deeply about John's happiness and well-being. When John died in that tragic plane crash in October 1997, Annie was devastated. Despite everything they had been through, despite the pain and the arguments and the divorce, she had never stopped loving him. His death felt like losing a part of herself, and she struggled with guilt and regret about their relationship. She wondered if there was something more she could have done, some way she could help him find peace and happiness in his final years. Annie also reveals the challenges she faced after John's death. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about their marriage, their divorce, and their relationship. Reporters called constantly, asking for interviews and inside information about John's private life. Annie made the difficult decision to stay silent, to protect her children's privacy and to honor John's memory in her own way. She didn't want to air their dirty laundry in public or profit from their personal struggles. For nearly 3 decades, Annie has lived quietly, focusing on her children and grandchildren, staying out of the spotlight, and processing her complicated feelings about her life with John Denver. She's watched as documentaries and biographies have told versions of their story, some accurate and some wildly off base, but she's never felt ready to share her own perspective until now. At 78, Annie says she's finally reached a place where she can look back on her marriage to John with both love and clarity. She doesn't regret their time together, even the difficult parts, because it gave her 2 wonderful children and memories of real love and happiness. She also doesn't regret their divorce, because it allowed both of them to grow as individuals, even if John never fully found the peace he was searching for. Annie wants people to understand that John Denver was a complex person, not just a wholesome country singer that his public image portrayed. He was incredibly talented and genuinely cared about making the world a better place through his music and his environmental activism. But he was also human, with flaws and struggles and pain that he carried throughout his life. His drinking wasn't just a bad habit. It was a symptom of deeper issues that he never fully addressed. His restlessness wasn't just artistic temperament. It was a genuine inability to find contentment and peace in his success. She also wants people to know that their love story, while it didn't have a happy ending, was real and meaningful. The songs John wrote about her came from a place of genuine emotion and deep connection. Annie's song wasn't just a pretty melody. It was John's way of expressing feelings that were too big for ordinary words. Their marriage may have ended in divorce, but it also produced beautiful music, 2 amazing children, and years of real happiness and love. Looking back now, Annie believes that she and John were both doing the best they could with the tools they had at the time. They were young when they got married. They were dealing with extraordinary circumstances because of John's fame, and they didn't have the support systems or understanding of mental health and addiction that people have today. If they had met later in life, or if John had been able to get the help he needed for his drinking and depression, things might have turned out differently. Annie's decision to finally speak out comes from a desire to set the record straight and to help people understand the real John Denver, not just a legend. She wants his fans to appreciate not just his music, but his humanity. She wants other people who are struggling in relationships with addiction or mental health issues to know that they're not alone, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to step away from someone who won't get help. Most importantly, Annie wants people to remember John Denver for the joy and beauty he brought into the world. Despite his personal struggles, he created music that has touched millions of lives and continues to inspire people decades after his death. His love for nature, his commitment to environmental causes, and his genuine desire to make the world better through his art are his true legacy. Annie's story is ultimately one of love, loss, resilience, and healing. She loved deeply. She suffered greatly. She made difficult choices, and she found a way to build a meaningful life after everything fell apart. Her silence over the years wasn't about shame or bitterness. It was about protection and respect and the need to process her own complicated emotions about one of the most important relationships of her life. Now, at 78, Annie Denver is ready to let the world know the truth about her life with John Denver. It's not the fairy tale that some people imagine, but it's real and human, and ultimately more beautiful because of its imperfections. Her story reminds us that behind every great artist is a complex human being, and behind every great love story are real people doing their best to navigate the challenges that life throws at them. If you've been moved by Annie Denver's incredible story and her courage in finally sharing her truth after all these years, please show your support by hitting that like button. This story deserves to be heard, and your likes help us bring you more amazing content about the untold stories behind your favorite artists. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who loves John Denver's music or anyone who appreciates real, honest stories about love and loss. And if you want to stay updated on more incredible revelations and untold stories from the world of music and entertainment, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We're constantly uncovering amazing stories that deserve to be told, and we don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.